All right, Max, what are we reviewing today? We are reviewing uh, Luisa, Now and Then by, I think you say this, Carole Maurel. And then it was also adapted by Mariko Tamaka, Tamiki, sorry, Tamakai. Probably did that one even worse. Apologies. But what do we got here? Interesting story. Uh, start off with saying not my favorite in the world, but hey, we'll get into it. I did want to review this one because I'd been looking around for some kind of book. Again, trying to eventually cover the whole world. This one is set. It's entirely in France, so I hadn't read a French book yet, really. This was that. It ended up being far less about the history culture, more of just like a general graphic novel story with some magic in it, which I'll summarize here. This is like one of those like parent swap movies, and we'll jump. This will lead us right into the characters part, kind of organically. But yeah, this is about Luisa, the titular character, and as the title says, the now and then part. She basically meets her younger self. So it's like one of those stories. It can come off as like very navel gazing, your older self meeting your younger self, and it's very reflective. What are all the mistakes we've made? Getting yelled at by your younger self for not getting to where you want to in life, and then obviously, not surprisingly, somehow trying to make amends with your literal self and understand yourself better and hopefully change your life in a different direction. But before we get into all that stuff, yeah, we'll go over the scores. A little hard to see. I need to get not a pencil, but hey, patent pending system. So starting with characters, would I ever read this book again for the characters? I would not. I think that this is probably a good story for some type of people, but I really found the main character, who is basically two main characters. You're dealing with young and old version of Luisa basically the entire time. Boy, not an endearing character. Like, I get that part of these stories is like, hey, the person starts out and they're not as nice, and you get to see their journey go throughout. But almost this entire book, Luisa's kind of an asshole, and she's like literally an asshole to her younger self. Pardon the language. Just not nice or responsible to a teenage version of themselves who are scared. If you can't be nice to a young kid version of yourself, it's hard to imagine you're nice to anybody. Do the side characters help out? No, absolutely not, actually. Most of the side characters are kind of jerks, and in my opinion, there's like one nice roommate, and some nice flashback characters that seem like good people, but overall, it didn't do the French stereotype any favors. Like, a lot of people are just short, kind of rude, and I just really didn't enjoy how the characters were written. Obviously, there's some reconciliations that happen in the end, and some like lights that could make you think these people improve, but I would never come back to this book for the characters. Some people might love these people because they find themselves at a point in their life where they are really lost, and maybe there's something hopeful here that like you can become different. But I didn't even get the sense by the end of the story these people were that different. So I really didn't love the characters, I'm not gonna lie. Art wise, I thought the art's really beautiful. I'll bleed this into the history culture part too. You get really nice scenes like this, like good scenes of restaurants. I just showed this as well, but like I think like the use of color when they meet each other. I'll show a different page. This is also the kind of culture you get here. You don't get like tons of French stuff, but like what you do get is like I like what they do. They have these chapter things with this hourglass, which I really like, kind of like showing their two lives mixing. You get great street views. I've lived in Paris for like a month. I think they do justice to a lot of the looks and feels of Paris, which is mostly where the story is centered. So I like the art. They have cool colors, and I think they do a lot of really good, bold and soft looking stuff with those colors. This is like not for the squeamish. Again, there's moments of violence. I think they illustrate the violence well, but so again, I think the art's the strong point for sure of this stuff. I think it looks great. I love the color. Definitely a strong point. History and culture, I already mentioned a little bit, but yeah, I think for a book entirely in France, I think you get stuff like it's true. They like a lot of people go to get kebabs. People, you get to see like the river. You get to see some of the bridges. You get to see some of the atmospheres, like at some point they're like sitting, like some of the stuff you obviously see in France if you live there, or assuredly if you were like a tourist going through Paris. But again, the book also does some disservice where like like her young version of herself has never been to Paris or like once, and she mostly makes fun of her younger self for trying to even want to do the touristy thing, like have a croissant. So it's also kind of robs from the history culture part. And there's really good ways of incorporating, I think, the language into the book. Like in Himawari House, I thought one of the coolest things I've never seen is where there's so many different languages, but there's always the English translation at the bottom of each text bubble, but then they have the original language on top. That's a level of commitment. I just think it's so commendable. It adds to how awesome that book is. But there's other ways books do this all the time. Like often, even if it's translated into English, maybe certain important phrases would be kept in the mother tongue. Like they would have some French just explicitly woven in here for like where it would make sense. But this book doesn't do that at all. So I do think they, again, they don't, aside from the aesthetics of the comic book, I can't give it a super high history cultural score. They don't really get the language in whatsoever. They don't do a lot of quintessentially French things, and they even kind of make fun of a little bit of the stereotypical touristy kind of stuff, or things that obviously French people do and they're associated with the culture. They just, So I just, think it was kind of not the strongest foot there, and I don't think that was the main point of the book, obviously, but also I didn't love the character journey of the main point of the book. And again, some people might love this story. It's obviously, I think, semi-popular since it was adapted into, I think, like This One Summer, I guess, which is a different, I think that's what Mariko adapted this into. So I think the story itself, again, it's one of those kind of typical stories again, swapping like with your mom or whatever. Like I forget the name of those movies. Like so, it's a cool enough idea, meeting your younger self. Obviously, that's been done enough before. Not totally new, but interesting. And I think the story might appeal to some people. I just, again, didn't love it for the reasons I've already said. Really didn't connect with the characters. Readability, I think, is strong. Again, you can see like typical pages. This is about as dense as the text gets. You're not gonna have to read through a ton of stuff. I think you get slowed down because the characters, for me, just didn't speed me along. But at the same time, the lightness of how it's written and the nice art is good. It's about it's a little shy of 300 pages. So I think you could read this in probably like 2 hours or less, maybe a little more than that, depending on your speed and how much you'd want to dwell on the art. But I think right in the middle of readability, it's strong. It's definitely not a weakness. An X factor, where I will give it an X factor, I think I hadn't read a story exactly like this. Again, normally for these stories where it's set in like a place like France or whatnot, again, it would have more of a focus on a local culture, historical thing. Maybe at the end of the day, this book shouldn't even be 100% included in a series like this. But I feel like if the book isn't entirely in another country and you're getting some elements of culture, I'm not gonna throw it out of this review series. But I think it was interesting, at least the mechanic of meeting your younger self, and there's parallels in both of their love lives that like haven't really worked yet. And again, identity is at the core of this book in a way that is more weirdly magically done than in some other ones. Like identity is typically one of the wrestling points of some of these graphic novels around the world, especially if you're like assimilating into a new culture. How do you balance your old and new? This is another identity story. So I think, and it's done in a slightly different way. So overall, I can't give it a super low X factor. I think it did some interesting stuff with that. And any book that has like an interesting magical element, I'm probably going to amp up the X factor because it does make it unique in some sense. But relatively low total. I think if you're reading books specifically with the idea of getting the whole the history culture aspect, you need to, if you're going to have like relatively low culture history, I think the story has to be really good. I didn't find this particularly compelling, but other people hearing the descriptions might really like it. It is pretty, and I think it's not a long read, so still worth a shot for those that would like that kind of thing. But I'll leave it there. Till next time.